We are Rogue Media Sports.
There are any number of reasons you might consider selling your home. To move closer to family, live within a smaller budget, or just wanting a change of scenery. Whatever your reasons, having to figure out all the various housing market trends in your area may not be what you signed up for. That's where an agent who is a realtor comes in. Realtors have the expertise to help you find the right price and navigate the process to sell your home in a way that's right for you. That's who we are. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors.
You haven't heard about the McCrispy yet? Well, then, you probably haven't heard the sweet silence after the first crispy bite either. Go try it for yourself to hear the best nut sound you've ever heard.
And it is the Doomsday podcast, an emergency episode that we've put together today. Ed Werder, who was, thought he was just sort of vacationing and spending time in Colorado, his birthplace. He was called into action today, and we are at the Frito Nation Productions, coming to you from far North Dallas, with the news today that Jason Witten is returning to the Cowboys. Various reports have the deal at $5 million for 1 year. Not bad money if you can get it. And Cowboys have found a way to bring back Jason Witten. So many different ways to go with this. We even heard reports, Ed, that Jason Witten was maybe wanting to come back, and who knows if Garrett was part of this. But during the season, we all know that he struggled at Monday Night Football and had tremendous blowback. And as you know, Ed, folks are not always kind on Twitter, so they were pretty tough on him. But Ed, just initially, I know you've been working the phones like crazy, as you always do. What have you been able to gather in terms of the reaction around the league to Jason Witten leaving the Monday Night Football booth to return to the Dallas Cowboys?
Well, I think, first of all, if you're Jason Garrett and you're coaching on the final year of your contract and you have to accomplish more than ever in 2019 to remain the head coach beyond the upcoming season, then you're elated to have the player that you consider the epitome of an NFL role model and a positive influence back in your locker room. I mean, Garrett's going to be coaching under an enormous amount of pressure, and the Cowboys have never made the playoffs in consecutive seasons with him as their head coach. In fact, the last head coach to even reach the playoffs in consecutive seasons was Chan Gailey. So that's the challenge that Garrett confronts, and I'm sure he feels reassured, even though he's not the play caller in what's been a turbulent off season for him personally, that he does get back a player that he really embraces and holds up as, you know, the guy that every Cowboys player should emulate when it comes to being a pro football player. And I would not discount at all Jerry Jones's role in all of this. In fact, Matt, a source close to Witten and Cowboys ownership told me, quote, "I wouldn't be surprised if 5 years from now Jason Witten is the head coach of the Cowboys, because Jerry has a huge man crush on him that exceeds even his relationship with Tony Romo."
Whoa.
And, we all know that it had to have been very difficult emotionally for Witten to be missing football, not be a part of a football team for the first time in 15 years, and then watch the team almost accomplish something that he never did when he was with the Cowboys, going, to an NFC Championship game. Obviously, they ultimately fell short. Meanwhile, he's in the Monday Night Football booth, and his rookie season is nothing like the rookie broadcasting season that Tony Romo enjoyed. And I think it was very hard. In fact, the same source told me that it was really hard for Witten to be so harshly criticized for his performance in broadcasting as a rookie, while Romo was being universally adored and, widely considered the best NFL analyst in television.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That made it even tougher that his close friend was being universally praised. Now, Ed, the ESPN, a place where you worked for many years, has come out with a statement about this today. We thank Jason talking about Witten, obviously, for his many contributions to Monday Night Football and to ESPN over the past year, and wish him continued success. We have seen many former coaches and players go into broadcasting before eventually returning to the game they love. So we understand Jason's desire to return to the Cowboys. In the coming weeks, we will determine our Monday Night Football plans for the 2019 season. In the interim, we will have a huge party to celebrate Jason's parting. No, okay, I made up that last sentence. But you know what I tweeted earlier, Ed, and I know you've been active on Twitter. You actually had to be making calls. I can just sort of go off the cuff and kind of say all my thoughts on these things, but which is what we do here on Doomsday. We try to be informed at all times as well. But I think this was sort of the best case scenario for all parties in a sense. I mean, I think we know that I'll just put it this way. I do believe he probably retired about a year before he really truly wanted to. It was an incredible opportunity at Monday Night Football, and he felt like he had to take it, and there was some thought that, well, Tony's had this success, so maybe I should go do this too. But, man, about 6 weeks into it, I think he was looking for a way out. There was a report from Schefter during the season that Garrett was reaching out trying to get Witten to come back. I mean, it really felt like sort of a bailout plan, and it just – now Witten will never be able to escape that it just did not work out for him in broadcasting. Now, maybe there'll be a better opportunity for him down the road that's a better fit. Maybe it's studio. I mean, the guy's he's a great-looking dude who might have a better presence in a studio atmosphere or that deal than a booth. It just wasn't working for him. So, ESPN gets out of this contract, whatever kind of contract they did with him, and then they can go, I would think, they won't make the same mistake twice, and they'll, instead of trying to copy, let's try to do something like Romo, it worked for CBS, they'll have the good sense, I would think, Ed, to go with a more seasoned analyst, and who knows, I don't know if maybe they'll go with a two-man booth, but they'll, I assume Booger, who knows, this really frees them up, honestly, to revisit the entire booth and decide what they want to do.
I don't think in any way that Witten was forced out by ESPN. And in talking to people there over the course of the year, there was an acknowledgement that they were concerned about some of the shortcomings that he clearly had, some of the faux pas that he created on air. I think there also should be a recognition that he was put in a very difficult situation as somebody, as you said. I think he started his second career early because of the opportunity and the fact that his friend Romo had moved so effortlessly from playing football to broadcasting it, that it appealed to him that he could possibly do the same. Most broadcasters need a place to be bad first, and Monday Night Football is no place for that. And so, obviously, he was mocked. I'm sure it was a humiliating experience for him at times. I have no doubt he put a lot of work into it and tried to be very professional. I think you're right that they perceived him as being better in studio than he was in a booth. And quite honestly, from what I had been told, when they were talking about the different permutations of what the booth could be for Monday Night Football, with Joe Tessitore doing the play-by-play, and he does it in a very radio-like way. I mean, he's very descriptive. He takes a lot of time. A three-man booth is very difficult to accommodate all the personalities, and to have, Booger McFarland was a guy they thought performed the best in the auditions, and that if the decision had just been made strictly on the performance of the candidates in the auditions, Booger McFarland would have just gotten the job. But there was the allure that Witten brought, as I said, and as you mentioned, of being a former Cowboy. Right out, they took him right out of the Cowboys huddle and convinced him to come do broadcasting, much like the Romo situation. We know there have been a lot of broadcasters, former Cowboys turned broadcasters, who had enormous success in the NFL as broadcasters, and ESPN envisioned that, and they wanted Witten so badly that I think they created a three-man booth strictly to accommodate him. And so I think those were some of the factors that influenced Witten's decision to leave.
Yeah, all good stuff. I can't help but think of your old buddy Ed, and I thought that was I hated how it leaked out, or there was a report. You might remember who wrote it. I can't remember, but that in the audition process that Favre had really I don't know, kind of struggled or had a horrible audition. That was at least presented at some point. I always kind of thought that Favre, we now kind of joke just because he was a former Cowboys quarterback, or we say, well, is Tony the next Don Meredith? The truth is, from a sound standpoint and just the overall persona, Brett Favre would be the heir apparent to a Don Meredith. I mean, that they just kind of have this. They carry themselves similarly. They sound a little bit alike. That's the guy I would have really enjoyed hearing from. Now, I just don't know, and you know this about Favre, if he has the desire to be on the road, all that stuff Aikman has to do week to week, and then he added a game, and you know what you have to put into that. Favre didn't mind doing that as a player, but as a broadcaster, I never was convinced that Favre really wanted to do that. But I always hated that we didn't get to hear him because I
don't think he'd be a candidate for ESPN now. After
I think you're right.
The incident you referenced where some ESPN executive producer claimed that he performed badly in his audition and that they disqualified him based on that. I don't think that was true at all. I think Favre decided that he didn't want to do the job. He always had misgivings about, as you said, the travel. I think they were concerned on their part about whether he could learn to be concise in a way that's necessary in a booth where a game is being called and you have to squeeze thoughts in between plays and so forth. I think the number one get among all broadcasting outlets on the NFL would be Peyton Manning. He would surpass even Favre. But I just really think that ESPN in all likelihood will go with a two-man booth now and expand Booger McFarland's opportunities, bring him up into the booth instead of being on that contraption he rode up and down the sidelines on. And if they do decide to have a third man in the booth, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Lou Riddick, the former personnel director with the Redskins and the Eagles, who's made a very profound impact as an analyst on football for ESPN on all of their studio programming.
To me, the guy that's traveling that still has a high profile as a former great quarterback, Steve Young, I feel like could step in and do a pretty good job. But again, he might prefer being more of an analyst in that role than being up there and kind of having to. I mean, it's just a whole different level of having to be engaged and all that kind of thing. But Riddick's an interesting one because he certainly brings a presence. I think there would still be a concern. Is he a so-called big, even if they've elevated him through the draft and all these things, is he sort of a big enough name or presence? But at some point you got to go with, okay, who's the most talented, who's the most knowledgeable, and that's what they're thinking.
Who's going to be good?
That's exactly. Who's gonna kill it? Who's going to actually be up there? And I thought the point you brought up, that's a really good one, and I've tried to tell people the same thing. Tessitore has a boxing background, and he is someone that is stylistically, he's trying to entertain people. Where Nance, of course, is so comfortable in sort of being Nance, and he's a little more like the Summerall approach. He's got a little more of a minimalist approach. Then that allows Tony to be Tony. I mean, that was a great match for Tony. And Tessitore is not that guy. Tessitore is, in his first year of Monday Night Football, is not going to hold back. I am a personality. I bring, through my voice and inflection and everything, I bring something sort of different to this game. And think who they had before. I mean, who was it? Sean McDonough. I mean, he's the ultimate. But Sean McDonough's the ultimate minimalist kind of. I think he's good. I really think he's good, but he's not Tessitore. Tessitore is big personality, and that's not McDonough. McDonough's just, I'm going to call the game, and I actually have he has a good sense of humor, but he's he's a straight man, and that's not Tessitore.
Well,
and so it's a little bit difficult to work with Tessitore. You got to get the right person that can kind of bounce off of him, and Witten was just not that guy, even though Tessitore tried. I mean, Tessitore tried all that stuff. They tried to kind of wit it up and, boog and wit and all this kind of thing, but it just felt forced.
As they should have. They should have tried to, create opportunities for Witten to be a stronger presence and allow him to speak in situations where he's more comfortable than he was, where obviously he appeared oftentimes to be out of his element. And as I said, that's a difficult thing for somebody to do, go right from the playing field with no real experience and limited coaching to go and assume this high-profile position. I mean, what Romo accomplished in that regard is very unusual in the sport and in broadcasting. And I think now Witten's got an opportunity now to go back and do the job that he really loves. And then I'll be surprised if we ever see Witten as a broadcaster again, because I think the next time he retires, it'll be permanent and he'll pursue coaching as his second or third career now, depending on how you're going to consider broadcasting.
Yeah.
But I think he still has a lot to offer the Cowboys. We talked about the fact that it was really the offense that held the Cowboys back last season, that the championship games featured the 4 highest scoring teams in football, and the Cowboys were, nowhere near that. They ranked, I think, 22nd in the NFL in scoring. And how could they possibly improve enough to go further in the postseason? And I think the way to do that is to be better in the red zone than they were last year. And I think that is one of the 3 areas where I think Witten represents still the most promise, even though he's going to be, 36 years old.
37.
I think he's 37 years old. He's still a very competent red zone target. I think you'll help him on third downs. I think you'll help him in the run game as a blocker who can capture the edge and let Ezekiel Elliott get outside. But just if you just look at the red zone alone, Dak Prescott among the playoff quarterbacks had the lowest passer rating in the red zone. And in Witten's what we thought was his final season in 2017, he had 5 touchdown catches. Well, 4 of them came from inside the red zone. And so he can be a factor in that part of the field. And there's no place where the Cowboys offense demonstrated greater futility than there. I mean, they scored 24 touchdowns out of 50 trips in the red zone last year. And that success rate was better only than the 4-12 Jets, the 5-11 Jaguars, and the 4-12 49ers. So, and then in goal-to-go situations where they have a first down inside, the 10, they were dead last in the NFL. So I think Witten can offer them some real promise that there'll be an immediate dividend, and his presence will be a factor in that important facet of the game.
And to jump off a point that Source made to you about his future as a possible coach, and could it even be with the Cowboys? Ed, I got to say, with them, in this modern day NFL, taking chances on guys 28, 29 years old, anybody that knows the guy in from the Rams, I mean, McVay,
Sean McVay,
yeah, if anybody,
youngest Super Bowl coach ever,
with what's happening with all that, and here's Jason. I mean, compared to McVay, this is an old man. He's 37 years old. Now he's going to try to preserve his head coach Jason Garrett's career or prolong it. And this is a somewhat of a lame duck season, you could call it, although, if they have some success, maybe Garrett somehow is able to get another contract. But if they don't, if this thing ends poorly, and let's say they don't make the playoffs, or they do and lose the first game, and they go ahead and Jerry finally says, okay, I've had enough of Garrett, it would not be a huge stretch. People would say, well, Kellen Moore, what kind of opportunities he's going to get? No. He doesn't have I know he has the age or whatever that people are falling in love with, but it would not shock me if Jason Witten were a candidate to take over as head coach.
Yeah, I think in that scenario he would make a lot of sense and have a lot of appeal to Jerry because he knows it would be popular with his fan base, and Garrett certainly does not occupy that position right now. He's been very unpopular with the fan base for a very long period of time. And it's interesting, I think, another point that merits mention when you talk about the coaching situation, if you listen to Witten do that game against Tennessee on Monday Night Football last year, you heard him speak with some criticism, which is something he does not often do publicly, in the direction of Scott Linehan, the offensive coordinator. He said things like, nothing comes easy in this offense. This is some of the stuff I couldn't stand when I played. Why wait to use tempo before you're doing it out of desperation? And then when they fire Linehan after the season's over, during the week of the Super Bowl, Witten was quoted as sort of being a big proponent of Kellen Moore, saying, he thought the offense would be much more innovative as they move forward, that he could see the offense taking a big step in 2019 with what they're trying to do and how they build this offense with Kellen Moore presumably making all of the play calls. So I'm not sure that didn't play a small role also in Witten returning to the Cowboys for another season.
I think you're right. And, thanks to Mark Friedman for jumping right in here. Thanks to Lowe's has been with us all season, and that's been a great thing for us. And MyBookie, we always like the MyBookie folks. By the way, Ed, the MyBookie, they use some of these prop bets that they've had recently, like around the All-Star game and everything, getting enormous attention, and I think mainly that's their association with the Doomsday podcast. Last thing, Ed, I want you to sound off on real quickly here, because we gotta free the studio up. You cannot imagine the lineup we have up here today. But this Gregory thing, I know you wanted to sound off on this. I mean, Irving, he's gone. The guy announced that he's not a role model, which I don't think he really needed to clarify that for us. But Randy Gregory, that's a more interesting story because he has been productive in his time on the field. He's missed a lot of games. It appears that he has now been suspended again. You can view this. I think this would be count as kind of his third strike. I don't know, Ed, from the folks you've talked to, how long do you think he could be out this time, and do you think we'll see Gregory back on the field with the Cowboys at some point?
Well, I don't think we know all the particulars of what inspired this most recent violation of the substance abuse program by Randy Gregory and violated the terms of his reinstatement, which we all know was granted, just last year. We were there at training camp when he was taking his first snaps and speaking for the first time. And I remember at the time, Mike Ornstein, the former Raider executive who was a significant member of Gregory's reinstatement team, and it was really his influence that got Gregory a direct meeting with Commissioner Roger Goodell. And Ornstein said that one issue for the players who have substance abuse problems and potentially mental illness issues like Randy Gregory, he said the league tends to treat them like bad guys instead of guys with diseases. And I guess that's a fair criticism to some degree, but I also think, the NFL does an awful lot and provides an awful lot of educational opportunities and counseling and actually mandates that, makes it a precondition of a player in Gregory's circumstance to return to playing in the NFL, and they monitor them very carefully. And so ultimately, in my mind, it's up to the player to take responsibility for the decisions that he makes. Whether you think this is a disease or you don't, ultimately the responsibility for doing the right thing falls upon the player. And all too often, Randy Gregory and David Irving have not made the right decision, and that's hurt their team. And I guess it's not so much a surprise that the Cowboys are standing behind Gregory because he's still playing on his rookie contract, so he's relatively inexpensive. They invested a second-round pick in him, and he's shown just enough potential to be an elite pass rusher when he does play. I mean, last year he came back from nearly 2 years of suspensions, and he played in 14 games. He made just one start, but he had 6 sacks and 15 quarterback hits, and those both ranked second on the Cowboys to DeMarcus Lawrence, who's about to break the bank. And maybe no defensive player has ever had more leverage on his team than DeMarcus Lawrence does right now, with 2 of his defensive line colleagues being either jettisoned from the roster through free agency in Irving's case or out for an unknown period of time, as will be the case with Gregory. I mean, it seems like every season the Cowboys start the year with a prominent defensive player serving a suspension and not being available, and that seems likely to be the case again with Randy Gregory in 2019.
Ed, good stuff as always, and thank you for doing this at a moment's notice today. It is the Doomsday Emergency Podcast. Ed, I know you've got a lot of you visit a lot of neat places in the off season. Let me go ahead and say, take Jupiter, Florida off the list.
That's where Bill Parcells lives.
That's what worries me. When Schefter said everybody else was thinking about Tiger, that's the first thing I thought about was like, golly, don't go in there, Bill. Oh, my goodness. Okay, Ed, tremendous.
Bill's an upstanding citizen. He would do no such thing. I'm quite confident in saying that.
Maybe not as confident.
One final point on the man who inspired this podcast, emergency edition of the Doomsday Podcast, return of Jason Witten, is this. Look, the last time this happened, when Witten surprised the Cowboys and retired last year after publicly stating that his intention was to play, and I think he meant that at the time, the Cowboys were ill-prepared, obviously, to lose their tight end, even though they had 15 years to come up with a succession plan. I suggest they not make the same mistake this next time Jason Witten retires. Therefore, I believe that drafting a tight end should remain a priority in this upcoming draft, especially since it's considered a position where there are considerable numbers of high-quality players.
Boy, yeah, amen to that. You know, they failed in a lot of areas in trying to draft these tight ends, but this is not the time. Just because your comfort blanket is back, you get your whoopee back. This is not a time to stop looking at tight ends. Even look at one in the second round, which is going to be their first pick, likely in this draft, unless they're able to move up or something like that. Combine going on, but of course the Cowboys upstage everything with the return of Jason Witten and the return of the Doomsday Podcast. Ed, thanks for being a part of this. Appreciate everything you do, and we will talk to you soon. Mark Friedel-Friedman, thank you for making this happen at a moment's notice. Good night, everybody.
Lights are shining, stockings have been hung. You're praying for your daughter, lighting candles for your son. They're living in the city now, you don't see them anymore. This year will not be like the ones before. And the streets are all but empty, the bars have all shut down, and it's hard to find a friend inside this godforsaken town. That emptiness it feels from your head down to your toes. I'm sorry, baby, that's just the way it goes. Once you were a young girl with lovers by the score, money by the handful,
A lot can happen between falling in love with a house online and owning it, between imagining living there and breathing in your new home for the first time. Having an advocate who can help you navigate the complex world of financing, inspections, negotiating, analyzing the market, and talking through any anxieties that may pop up, that can make all the difference. That's what the expertise of a Realtor can do for you. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors and bound by a code of ethics, because that's who we are.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.